Let's answer this question quickly. Exam grades are going to be tougher to get this year. Let's find out who for and by how much and how on earth do we know. We're going to start with Ofqual. That's the organisation which tries to make sure that exams are fair every single year. So the chair of Ofqual, the chief exam regulator, is called Jo Saxton, and this is what she had to say. She says that in 2023 she can confirm we're going to go back to pre-pandemic levels. So what are pre-pandemic levels? Well, those are the exam results last seen in 2019. So, a very short history lesson. 2019 was the last set of exam results without COVID, and 22% of students got a grade 7 and above, and 70% got a grade 4 and above. Then we had school closures and COVID, and there was teacher assessed grades. But halfway through the teacher assessing process, Ofqual decided that some students would definitely need higher grades than teachers were giving them. So we got the great algorithm scandal, and the chair of Ofqual resigned as a result. But what that meant is that there was a big rise in people getting 7s and above, and an even bigger rise in people getting 6 and above. Well, in 2021 we couldn't have that same disaster again, so we gave the responsibility to teachers. Teachers did their assessments, and now 29% of students went up having a grade 7 or more. Okay, then we get to 2022 and the government said, no, we're not having any of this, we're going back to exams. However, they said, well, it would be unfair to go straight back to 2019 levels because in 2022 loads of students had missed loads of school, so we couldn't unfairly penalise them, and so what we'll do is we'll go halfway. So halfway between 29 and 22%, they came out at 26 allowed grade 7 and above. And halfway between 70% and 77%, they said, right, we'll let 73% of students get a grade 4 and above. So what's the plan this year? Well, the plan this year is to go back to pre-pandemic levels, 2019. Now, here is another fascinating thing you might not know about the exams. So this is the way you and I might set up an exam. If you got X many marks, you get a grade 9. If you got this many marks, you get a grade 8, and so on, all the way down to a grade 1. Because you would think, wouldn't you? I want to measure how much students know, and then when I'm happy about what they know and what they can do, I'll give them a grade. But no, that is not how exams work in this country. Instead, what happens is everyone is ranked. So the top person out of 550,000 taking exams down to the bottom. All those scores are ranked, and then the government comes in and they say, look, we don't care how much anybody knows. Instead, the government steps in through Ofqual and they say, right, whatever these students have scored, 22% of them are going to get a 7 and above. Whatever they've scored, 30% of them are going to get a grade 3 or below. So all you have to do is avoid being in the bottom 30% and try to get in the top 22%. But there is another problem this year. So during the pandemic, I asked my students via YouTube, how many of you have learnt more by being at home than you did at school? And 25% said they had learnt more. A quarter of students had learnt more. Was that something that just happened to my viewers because obviously you come to my channel because you want top grades? Interesting. There is a kind of an answer to this question. So there's an organisation called No More Marking that marks tens of thousands of students' work across the country. At the minute, it's specialising in GCSE and Year 6 SATs results. What they do is set up their own tests that are much better than the SATs, much fairer, much more interesting. I'm not going to go on about that now, but they found something remarkable. Because of COVID, there are a large number of students who are much better than students in 2019. Much better. Why? Because when they went home, they read a lot, they motivated themselves, they learned more than when they were at school. But at the same time, there is a big chunk of students, and you will have seen them in your school, a big chunk of students who have kind of given up. When COVID came, they went home, they played on social media, they played Xbox and God knows what they did, but the last thing they did was study. And they turned up for online lessons, but they didn't bother learning any of it. So, we've now got a massive number of students who learned very little. So what does that mean? Well, if we've got a huge number of students at the bottom and a huge number of students at the top, what is going to happen to these grade boundaries? Well, they're going to stay the same, but it's going to be much harder to be in the top 22% because there are more students getting really great marks. But it's going to be much easier to get a grade 5 and 6 and a 4 because there's going to be loads more students in the bottom 30%. So some students who would normally have got a grade 3, they're going to get bumped up to a 4, and students who would normally get a 4 are going to be bumped up to a 5 and so on. But not at 7. It's going to be tougher to get a 7, tougher to get an 8, tougher to get a 9, because there are simply more of those students out there, because they didn't waste the COVID years, they actually learned more. And then there is another spanner in the works. So we're going back to Ofqual again, and they carried out their own research into how accurate exam grades are. This is what they found. 1 in 4 grades are wrong. And what I mean by that is, if a senior examiner marked them, an other examiner would give a different grade to the senior examiner. So that happens to 1 in 4 of your grades. But what about English, I hear you ask? Well, there the news is really bad. So 50% of literature grades are wrong. An examiner will give a different grade to the senior examiner, and 40% of English language grades are wrong. This is a bit of a disaster for English teachers who are trained in their training to think that exam marking is accurate. But in English, exam marking is not accurate. That's why you might have seen some of my videos where I teach exam techniques that force the examiners to give you the marks you deserve, that get rid of as many of those errors as possible. I shall be making more of those videos in the future, and you've heard it here first, I'm actually going to sit a new GCSE exam in November, which I think is loads better than AQA. So, let's summarise. Exam results are going back to 2019 levels. For most of you, that is much harder. However, if you're someone who would only have got a grade 3, you've got a much better chance of getting a grade 4 this year, because there are loads of students at the bottom who simply haven't worked. Every year I poll my viewers to find out how many of them have gone up by more than 2 grades, more than 3 grades, and so on. 27% say they go up by at least 3 grades. I'm a bit nervous this year, but I'll see you in August. Good luck.